Yeah.
I want to get into a big question here because this was a discussion area which you don't often hear on podcasts. And I wanted to get your take on this. So, we're talking about anxiety, stress, mental health disorders, this sort of thing. And these are subjects which are often not talked about or admitted to by men due to the stigma that seems to be attached to admitting to being prone to such symptoms. So, society seems to have programmed us with this idea that real men don't get fearful or anxious. So I've got a slightly different take on this, which is if you've not experienced some kind of fear or trauma or anxiety over the past 4 years, then you've not been paying attention to what's really going on in the world. And that means you can't be fully informed and streetwise as to what's happening and to what end. And if that's the case, what use can you be to anyone? So the men who have been getting anxious have been getting so because they've been taking personal responsibility for themselves and their place in the world. And for me, one of the saddest signs through the whole COVID debacle was seeing big, stocky, burly men with shaven heads and tattoos and all the rest of it, wearing masks and standing in line in the supermarket. There's never been a time in human history where legions of authentic men, these are real men, stepping into true and righteous action in the world to put down evil and tyranny and to fight for truth and freedom has been needed. And yet, where were they all? So much for real men. All these guys have just been doing what they're told, not causing a fuss, just complying with it all. And so evil and tyranny has taken a hold because they didn't stand up in right action. You know, a man who would do that is a real man. But we have to accept that all of us have masculine and feminine aspects to our personality. So part of the sacred feminine within us is, I guess, being susceptible to anxiety and things such as this, because it's the sacred principle of care. You care about the world, you care about other people, you care about freedom. And you're only a real man if you embody the sacred masculine, which involves taking physical action in the world where required, but also embody those feminine aspects of yourself, which involves care. So that's my take on it.
It's about balance, isn't it? At the end of the day, you know, and you're dead right. I mean, I was having this conversation with my dad last night, funnily enough, about the fact that there are few men. When I had the pub, it was very interesting that the youngsters that were coming in. The reason we talked about it with my dad last night, he likes a good ale. My dad, you know, we're talking about the fact that nowadays youngsters, when they come to a pub, they don't drink beer. They don't drink an ale, you know, they're not interested in that. They go and sniff a line of Coke in the toilets and get themselves a Malibu and Coke. They're walking around with flip-flops on and handbags, you know, and we are in a very strange period where, who is it? Mr. Jones in America said they're turning the frogs gay. You know, I mean, testosterone levels have plummeted massively over the years. And yeah, what we saw over the past few years, really leading the charge in the pandemic was the women, because Mama Bear came out.
Absolutely right. Most of the activists that were really making a difference and organizing these freedom rallies and things like that, I noticed it's all women. The women have stepped up in the last 4 years. They've really embodied that sacred principle of care. And the men have been put to shame. I mean, I'm generalizing. Obviously, there's exceptions. But, you know, men have just been pitiful in how they've reacted the last 4 years. The women have been doing all the work.
They have, but again, it's balanced, because now the women are going out of balance because they're becoming too masculine, because they've been forced into a corner, and people are out of sync. And this is where mental health becomes a problem, because if you are out of balance spiritually, mentally, and physically, you're going to feel it, you know, and anxiety is going to play a part. And there's nothing wrong. Believe me, there's nothing wrong in admitting you're having a problem. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, at the end of it, there's nothing wrong, actually, and sometimes it's holding your hand down. So can you give me a hand up a little bit as well? You know, ultimately, you know, it comes down to us in our own journeys and finding that true power within. But it's nothing wrong with struggle. We do struggle, and there are good people out there waiting to help us as well.
Just my little take on that, Mark, and I do think we are, of our age group, we are the last of a generation that remembers the old way.
Yeah.
We're the last of the remembers before technology. And for me, again, we talk about, the powers that be. But if you were looking to like sort of weaken society, the one of the biggest thing in society was men. And that they would stand up to things.
But
so
let me just say there that if they tried to pull the COVID stunt in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s, I feel they wouldn't have got away with it, because the men would have risen up and said, "We're not having this. We're putting this down." But they waited until the 2020s because they were satisfied that they'd engineered society and altered men in their state,
100%,
so that it wouldn't be a problem.
Definitely. Yeah, because you look at it, right? Now, this is where it gets, obviously, to take a whole show. The men of our generation, unfortunately, are more likely to men who would go and have a walk in the forest and take their own life. And they wouldn't tell anybody that they're feeling down. And I've had a very close, one of my best friends did that recently. And so we're at that generation, where, your parents would have said, suck it up, you're a man, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But then society now is everything's like, the society today, if they said put a chip in your head or in your hand, they would do it. Because everything's too easy. Everything's on demand right now. Everything's watched through Netflix, or it's watched through reality TV programs. And all of that is a watering down of masculinity and society. They started off with breaking up the family nucleus of mom and dad, which then obviously splits up family. And then you could go into all the realms of immigration and mixed races and all the, and it's all part of design, but people never always get lost there. Yeah, we're all the same, but people are using different things to their advantage to try and cause issues, so for me, like what I have seen more and more, so like I've had men who have been on my building sites, the bricklayers and the electricians, and what they need is someone who's prepared to open the door to have the conversation. It's not that they don't want to have the conversation. It's that they don't want to be the first ones to say it, because they feel it's almost, they think it's weak. You know what I mean? But once you have that conversation and you say, look, it's safe to talk about these things, there's nothing weak about it. If you're not feeling very well, then it's important that we discuss it. Now, the other side of that is, unfortunately, we have now a society where if they stub the toe, they've got depression. So now they've they're using the whole mental health thing to their advantage. And not, like there's people out there who are actually struggling with certain things, but then there's just people who are just jumping on the bandwagon. And I think that's a lot with a lot of agendas these days, what's out there. It's let's just jump on that bandwagon. Now, again, you have to look at where you're putting your energy, because, yeah, I've sort of lost my track there, but
where you pay attention, isn't it? But yeah, it is interesting to see how they've done it. It's been very clever. Very, very clever, and they're playing the long game, aren't they? That seems key to me.
Yeah, they're engineering Gen Z right now, so-called, which is my kids' generation.
Yeah.
And so after the millennials, you get Gen Z. I don't know what comes after Z or Z. That's like almost as if they're the last generation, and they're announcing this. But at some point, our generation, Generation X, is going to have to step aside and leave everything to the millennials and Gen Z to sort out. It's going to be their responsibility. And yeah, it's not looking good on that front because of the way these generations have been shaped and molded, and their value systems that have been created for them. When their time comes to step into action, unless something changes, it's not looking good.
My daughter goes to college. It's a college I used to work at. I worked at there 11 years, and I could see changes happening there quite, going back about 15 years now. But now I step through that front door and you will see agenda after agenda all plastered all over the wall. They're being indoctrinated as soon as they walk through the door, and my daughter's very bright, thankfully, and she does listen to me. She thinks I'm nuts most of the time, but she does have a listen, and she's aware that they are pushing these things down people's throats. But you have got, in that particular college, there's probably 2,000 kids that go through those doors. There's a large percentage of them that are going to come out of there with rainbows all over the place. You know what I mean? It is worrying. It is worrying because somebody has to re-educate in a way. It's like the real world has to come forward. You know, and maybe this is why the breakup's happening. Maybe this is why people are finding suffering at the moment, because they're realizing they're in a dream world. It's not real.
So let's bring it back and talk about some coping mechanisms then, because we've identified some of the problems. After problems come solutions, and different things are going to work for different people. Whatever gets you through the night is all right. You know, as long as it causes no harm to another, then whatever works for you, embrace it. I mean, for me personally, I find it very cathartic and healing to get inside soulful, uplifting house music. So this morning earlier, I was doing a mix of this type of music, and it really does give me a lift. Genuinely, I can feel my soul being uplifted by this music. It's the only genre of music that does that for me anymore. You know, I used to listen to rap and hip hop and R&B and urban, and that stuff has gone way down the shitter in recent decades. So the only music I can stand to listen to is soulful house. But a lot of this stuff is rooted in gospel roots. And it just speaks to my soul. It speaks to my spirit, and I can get lost in that music, and it works for me. It's not going to work for everyone. That's my coping mechanism. Different people are going to have different ways of getting through. So let's discuss what some of these coping mechanisms might be.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of music, obviously music's a great healer and has been for me for many years. I'll be honest though, Mark, I can't listen to things that I used to listen to, like you say, you know.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
You know, it's like I used to listen to the Foo Fighters at one time. It's like there's no way I can even consider it anymore.
I used to listen to Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and that stuff don't work for me anymore.
No, and it's sad. But I mean, in terms of music, though, obviously, again, we can go into the conspiracy that they changed the frequency of the music in popular music. So you could start looking at solfeggio tunes in itself that are tailor made to help on certain levels for particular reasons that you may need help, and that could be anxiety. There are certain frequencies available, and we've been putting out some solfeggio sleep meditations over the past 12 months as well, so people can just bang them on in the background and sleep while they're playing away.
Can I just jump in there, because I'm going to have to go in 10 minutes, me, Mark, unfortunately. If we just break people up into two sections for a moment. Right. So you'll have people who are, say, suffering with depression, anxiety, phobias, this kind of stuff, who can tackle it straight head on. And then there'll be people who are a little bit deeper. They want to do a bit of, they want to go back and do the inner child work and the crying and all the rest of it. Right. Again, it is whatever works for that person, because ultimately what it is, it's the electrons in the brain, what is connected to that emotion and the feeling of the event when it first happened, what we're looking to alter. Now, for me, it was a case of, so if I was in the process of right now having an anxiety attack or a phobia, and just so people know, look, when you're in the midst of these, like these fears, you can actually feel like you are going to die. Right now, as far as I know, there's nothing recorded evidence that anyone has ever died from an anxiety or a phobia attack. So that should be the first little scratch in the CD in your brain that this cannot kill you. Right. Then what I would say then is, if you can either close your eyes or breathe through it while it's happening, you'll notice it might feel like a long time, but it actually only lasts around about 16 to 30 seconds. And then this spike in the emotions and the feelings, they start to reside. And then you can start taking control. Now, a good way you could do is if you tell your partner or a close friend, and if you have like a signal, because what happens is when you're in the midst of a phobia or an attack, you don't feel like you can speak. You don't feel like you can reach out and tell someone. But if you've already got like a signal that you could give your partner or a friend, and so they know, oh, look, he's having an attack. You could be walking down the street, just taking the dog for a walk, and be in the midst of a phobia or an anxiety attack, the person's talking to you next to you has no idea that you're actually shitting yourself and feel like you're going to die. And this can feel like heart palpitations, tingling in your body. Your face can start going numb. There's so many side effects to it. Now, but if you're strong, I don't want to say strong enough because it's not about that, but if you're somebody who can tackle this straight on and say, do your worst, kill me then. You can flick the switch on that power of that bully, which is the phobia or the thing. Now, for somebody else, another thing they could do is, if it was an event that happened, say 10 years, say you was involved in a car crash and, you know, your life changed from that car crash, what you need to do is spend some time, and as painful as it might be, you need to go back in your thoughts and relive the event. And then while you're watching the event on the big picture in your mind, start to adjust what happened and start to look at it from another way. So what you're doing then is you're starting to put a positive spin on what was a very negative emotion or an event that happened in your life. So, and then what happens is the brain has this amazing way of starting to like tell its own story. And this is why people spend their life, by the way, telling the story of their past, because the brain loves it. Because as long as you're telling this story over and over again, and someone says, "Oh, I can't believe you've gone through all that. I'm so sorry." That's like a hit of dopamine in the back of your head.
Well, it's the ego identity.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? It's so if people want to move on with their life, the first thing you've got to do, by the way, is stop telling the story, because that's all it is. It's just a story. This moment right now, if you're living in the present, you're not having an anxiety attack or a phobia in this moment. So you have to start learning to live in the moment, because then the moment becomes bigger and bigger. And before you know it, you've not had an attack for a week, a month, a year, and then it could be 10 years. And then you could start bringing in coping mechanisms like triggers. So, you know, if you're about to have one, okay, I'm going to, like I used to have an unbelievable phobia where as soon as it used to go between light and dark, dusk, that funny, eerie feeling outside, I used to feel like I was going to start tripping. It gave me the same feeling and fear as when somebody put an LSD in my drink when I was a kid. Now, that was a massive shit me up, right? And I spent years like with my missus holding my hand, walking me, you know, at night time to try and overcome my fear of the dark. Until I got to that point where like, oh, fuck this, kill me. I'm not living like this. But what you could do then is, it's like, it could just be like turning the light on your mobile phone while you're walking. You just need to distract from the thoughts that you're having to something else. And as soon as you distract the thoughts, you can't hold two thoughts at the same time. So you can either have the fear and that thought, or you can change your thought. So if somebody knows you're having an attack, they can start talking to you and do something to take your mind off it straight away.
Well, that's why people use alcohol and drugs as coping mechanisms, because
Exactly.
it's distraction. Like you say, you know, you want to escape that state of mind that you're experiencing, which is not pleasant. So you need something else to replace it. Some people use alcohol, they use drugs, but you can use music. And there's probably many other things that you can use. You do need to distract your mind from going to unwelcome places.
100%.
But these distractions, unfortunately, as well, can distract you from finding your true self also. Now, it's understandable while you're going through an attack that you would want some distraction because it's a horrible feeling. But to really work on yourself and start eradicating these things, we need to start remembering who you are. Then you start having to find out processes of actually unpicking your subconscious mind and why these things keep coming up and up and up. And it's not anyone's fault. It's nobody's fault that you are feeling this way. It's not your fault that you are repeating this cycle, but it becomes your fault when you actually realize why it's happening and you need to do something about it, which is spending a bit of time with yourself. Now, we're not talking about the inner child. We're talking about the programming and how you can do this. So you can start looking at your habits every day. Here's a real quick exercise you can do. So every morning I wake up and I'll look at my phone and I'll look at it for notifications. And then you ask yourself, why? Why do I look for notifications, Ant? Well, because I want to see if someone's contacted me. Why is that important that somebody's contacted you? Well, because I like to feel that people like me. Why is that important that you want to be feel like? And you can dig deep and you just keep asking and asking, and you'll get to some real answers. And it's so liberating when you actually work on habits, such as even brushing your hair, something as ridiculous as that. Digging deep to why you do it, and you find a bit more about yourself, and you start becoming, I found over the past 12 months, a lot stronger in my own being from realizing that it's all this programming that I'm being consumed with isn't me. It's not truly me. It's just a program.
It's all in the subconscious mind. And I mentioned this in a podcast that I did recently with Kelvin Patterson. I've got a whiteboard on my desk now, and I write messages to myself, which are designed to be soaked up by my subconscious mind. And the one that's on there at the moment just reads, and it ties into what we've been talking about, just as in any given week, month, year, or human lifetime, so there are good and bad points in any given day. While the bad parts are happening, you can keep yourself going by realizing that they surely will pass, and that the good points will be just around the corner. So again, we're back to the ebb and the flow and the rhythm of life and of the universe and of polarities, and all things must pass, in the words of George Harrison. So we can be sure of that.
Beautiful. Mark, can I just quickly, two things I want to, and then I'm going to have to shoot. I'll leave you in the capable hands of Anthony. When I'm gone, if you explain as well the exercise 7 levels deep, because people listening would get a lot out of 7 levels deep. It's a very good starting point to understanding yourself. And then the other thing I wanted to quickly mention as well is, and this could be something you could even resonate with yourself without you even knowing it. We've talked about anxieties and phobias and everything else from a negative point of view, but also people are scared of good things happening. They're scared of change. So if you actually say to someone, do you want to change? But then you look them in the eyes and say, do you really want to change? Because the fear of changing means you are no longer going to be the person you once was. Now, that's a lot for people to understand, because then they have to start to admit the person who I once was is not working. I need to become something else. I need to become the butterfly from the catalyst, right? Now, that emotion and that fear can set off a different type of anxieties and worries and feelings. But so it's not always negative as well. People can be fearful of that. People are also scared of success.
Definitely.
You could be on the cusp of something amazing, Mark, but you're actually holding yourself back because you're scared to let go and trust it. So you could be creating your own fear and blockages in your life because you know what comes with success. And then you have to get your head around that. So it's so much deeper than just, the basics. But I'm going to have to shoot because I've got to be somewhere.
We're very complex creatures. That's the thing. We're very complex.
Thanks so much for talking to you, Mark. And
all right, mate. Thank you.
Again, mate.
Yeah, all the best. Thanks for your contribution to the chat. Great stuff.
Well, yeah, I think the whole reality, though, Mark, is very complex. And we're all very unique individuals. We're all facing very unique situations as well. So not everything will work for people. But I can go through certain processes that I went through last year, because I found myself after the pub, basically to a point I was so full of shame and guilt that I couldn't even dress myself properly. I couldn't, I didn't see the point anymore in certain respects, and there was dark thoughts and everything else. And it was, how am I going to get through this? So I started a process from gratitude, really, and that gratitude was it could be that I've opened my eyes that morning. It's as basic as that, and then building it up. But I was probably quite strong in some respects, subconsciously. Whatever it was that was driving me was that I wasn't going to allow this to defeat me. I made an intention, and that intention was I was going to fix myself. It was down to me. You mentioned earlier on about responsibility, personal responsibility. I think that's where a lot of the crux is. We have to become more responsible for ourselves. Let's put it honest, the nanny state wants us to be completely embedded to the system. We've been addicted to the system. We are softened because of the systems we've been placed in. It's down to us to then become the true self that we are, the spark that we really are.
Yeah. No generation before us has had to face the military grade psychology weaponization that's been dropped on us. You know, they've got behavioral scientists now working full time, figuring out how they can manipulate the human mind and change our behaviors and change our viewpoints and stuff. There's no handbook for this. There's no manual. No generation before us has had to face this. It's a different kind of war. It doesn't involve bullets and shells and tanks. It involves the mind. It's a war on the mind. And we're the generation that's been charged with the responsibility of finding a way through that, because no generation before us has ever had to do this.
No, they've clearly worked this out quite well, haven't they? It is, like I say, it's a battle, it's a war on the mind, but I believe it's a spiritual war as well. You know, they're breaking the spirit. I think there's quite dark. You know, me and Kev do come from different kind of angles on this, but I do believe there's a dark esoteric force above. You know, when I think it's all levels. You know, you've got your government on one level, if you like, and your big pharma and things like that, and then you go above that, and you got your Illuminatis and blah blah blah. And I think it goes above that as well. I think we have a few levels that we're dealing with, but when you start actually realizing who you truly are, and you're not the name, you're not the body, you're not your ego, because that just is part of the damage that you face day to day. You are more powerful than they allow you to be. The reason that they are doing what they're doing, you know, let's be honest, if we weren't powerful beings, why would they need to put so much on us? Right. You know, we are capable of so much more. We are creators. They will be worried the fact that come together with consciousness, we could create an incredible world. And that's something that we need to do. But they're putting fear to God in everybody. So all we do in a wider sense of it all is create more fear and more destruction. So we need to break through that individually, recognize our true selves, come together as a community and start creating the better world that's out there for our kids. Because unfortunately, like you said, the generation next are going to be even more programmed than we are. You know, it's going to get tougher. This is already tough. And as AI comes in, as AI is already here, obviously, but as it gets more involved in day to day, people are going to get more lost. So we have to be the change now. We have to make that. And yes, starting with self, it's important. And accept the fact you are going to have weaknesses. Accept the fact that it's down to program. We're human beings. We're emotional. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to have mental health problems. Unfortunately, everything's been thrown at us. How could you not?
Yeah,
it's not a bad thing. You know, we'll get through this together. But let's start from the inner self. You are better than what they have made you feel you are.
That's right. And you touched on it there. The insidious onset of AI and transhumanism, 5G smart grid technology that's being put in everywhere. This reality is feeling ever more artificial by the day to me. And again, it's our generation that remember better times. You know, we've got memories going back, well, in my case, to the 1970s, 1980s. The world seemed and felt very different then. It felt more natural. These days, it just feels like an artificial creation. It feels as if it's a realm that's being presided over by some kind of malevolent demonic force that is anti-human. You know, I'm just calling it as I see it. And it baffles me that so many people seem to be oblivious to this. Everything just feels so artificial and so wrong with all this technology that's coming in. But most people just seem to be going along with it. How can anyone think this world at this stage in the game is in any way normal and just fine? How is it that the likes of us can see that something is desperately wrong, but the majority still can't? So, there's a lot there, but
There
really,
is
I
a
just
lot.
wanted to make the point about the onset of artificial intelligence, because you brought it up. Technology is everywhere now, and it's being weaponized, it's being used against us, and this world just feels very different to the way it once did. And so maybe this is a good point to get your take on whether we are living in some sort of simulation. That's a very popular idea within the sort of conspiracy realm these days, that this is some sort of virtual reality creation, an overlay that's been put in place on top of the natural creation that was there before. I'm really starting to come around to this idea now of a simulation. I resisted it for a long time because I didn't want to have to accept that anything other than the creative force, the creator God, the Most High, could be presiding over what's going on in this reality. But the idea that it's somehow been hijacked by some sort of malevolent force, and it's some sort of simulation now, which isn't natural, which isn't what was there before, is starting to really resonate with me now. So I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, it's something I've been deep diving myself, to be honest with you. I'm very intrigued by the reality we're in. I don't perceive the reality that we were brought up in to be the true reality. I think it's much deeper and much more complex than what we had the perception of. Now, in terms of a simulation, I don't know if I go down the route of it being a simulation as in a computer simulation, because I think they'd want us to feel it's that way, because then it's easier to put another set of goggles on and go into another simulation. They could almost normalize it a little bit. But I do think the premise of it is right. I do think it is sort of a matrix reality. I don't think I think there's so much more, because we can only use, or the majority of us only use 5 senses, so we will only see, feel, touch, and smell. So I do believe it goes a lot deeper than that, and we are projecting our reality in effect. So I don't know how I would give it a terminology, but simulation does fit, but I would say that it's deeper than that, and it's more complex than that. I think the Gnostics would say that we're, it's a demiurge, isn't it? And
an
then
archontic force, yeah.
Yeah, and you've got the archons, and I kind of go with that, and I think there is a test going on here in terms of the souls on this planet to find and navigate the way through life, if you like. So I think as they bring in more AI and, like you say, the transhumanism agenda, I feel that is an opportunity for them to try and trap souls more on this realm. I think that's what they're trying to do. So we are the bridge in that respect, because we do remember when life was a bit more simpler and slower. Yeah, and it was a more beautiful life. And I remember when during the COVID, being at the pub, I think it was during one of the lockdowns, and I was I don't drink anymore, by the way. I stopped drinking when I started self-healing, but I had a few drinks. It was on a Christmas. I was the only one in the village that decided to have a Christmas party. I had it on the street, and I was giving free hugs, and all the villagers thought I was nuts, because everyone was frightened of this imaginary thing that was floating around, But I remember crying in my beer while my daughter was there and saying, I can't believe that you're not going to enjoy the life I had. I can't believe it. That I had that freedom in the 90s to go to nightclubs and go traveling, and they're going to start bringing in these.
We didn't realize it at the time, did we? We were just having fun, enjoying life. It never occurred to us that one day all this might be taken away, or attempts would be put into place to take it all away. We just lived our lives and didn't really think about it. Well, this is my personal experience anyway.
Yeah.
And now I think back to the 90s, which is my favorite decade. I had an absolute blast in the 90s. Just love those times. And they just seem a world, a lifetime away. They just seem like in a different reality to the one we find ourselves in now. And this raises a big question for me, because if this is some sort of simulation, if this reality has in some way been hijacked by some malevolent force, where does that leave God, or the creative force, whatever title you want to put on it? How could the creator of everything have allowed this to have taken place. I mean, I get the concept of free will and that the creator doesn't interfere in human affairs because it's down to us to create the reality that we experienced. But who asked for this? Who asked to live in these kind of conditions, you know? And how can any loving, benevolent God, if that's what we've got, have allowed this hijack to have taken place? That's a big question.
It's a big question, and I certainly don't have the answer, but it's an interesting topic for sure, and I've pondered on it myself, you know, and I've listened to some people who talk about the fact that this reality has had some kind of malware, if you like. It's a virus of its own.
Right. That's where the Mandela effect comes in and things like that, you know.
Yeah, and you can imagine if energy is manipulated, then yes, it could possibly be that there's been, if you like, darker energy that has taken over the realm. I mean, I think the Gnostic, certainly even Christianity, believes that this is actually Satan's realm. This is, you know, and we're unfortunately, we are here to play our part.
It's hard to argue with that sometimes.
I think it's very hard, because at the end of the day, if you look around, most of the time it's decay and suffering. You know, that is pretty much the journey of a human being. But we are here to actually enjoy life as well. I don't believe we are here to suffer. We're here to ride the waves and to learn and to grow. But we are here to find love and enjoyment out of anything that's possible, and there is so much to love and enjoy here also, and we mustn't forget that. That's right. But we are in difficult times for sure. This is the trickiest period, and you and I would never have imagined that we were going to be doing this, but maybe they were softening us up then in the 90s also, you know. I mean, it's
well, we were getting our training for sure for what we're doing now. You know, it was all life experiences that would come to be useful in the type of work that we're doing now. We just didn't realize at the time that we were getting trained and groomed and prepared for what we're doing now. So we're nearly done. I've got another couple of things that I just wanted to ask, but just to make the point that life is not supposed to be all about suffering. You know, it seems that these lives are intended to teach us and to allow us to grow and evolve, but it shouldn't be all about suffering. You don't need to suffer all the time in order to learn and evolve and grow. There's got to be some joy, some happiness. And I think life is intended to be a rich tapestry of these different experiences. And when they're only about suffering and hardship and struggles, then we've strayed from the path somehow. Something's gone wrong, and we've got to find a way back to joy and happiness to balance everything out. It's supposed to be there. Joy is supposed to figure in these lives.
Yeah, there's joy, but there is joy in so much just by looking around you. You know, if you were to walk, I know, and people say, "Oh, we'll just go for a walk." Well, you know what? If you do that, and you actually, you're talking about, Kev's not talking about inner child, but if you find the beauty in just looking at an insect or a bird whistling and singing in the morning when you go for a walk, there is great joy in that. You know, there is beauty everywhere. They're doing their darndest to make us feel negative and shit all the time, but we have to take everything that is wonderful on in this realm, because there are great people as well, great conversations, you know, a hug. You know, there is a frequency and a vibration that you can give off and change somebody by just being in the room.
Being happy has become a revolutionary act.
Hasn't it just? Hasn't it just? It's. But we're here to change that. I firmly believe that. There's a number of us, and I think we had this discussion before, Mark. You know, whether there's a mission. You know, and I really feel that there is a mission for many people on this planet right now to change the world. And we can change the world. I mean, if you think about it, when I had the pub, you could have 100 people in that pub and the atmosphere could be fantastic. And then one person could come in and change the atmosphere in an instant, and it's energy. So we can do the complete opposite. We raise our vibration, whatever floats your boat to raise that vibration. But I would say I would really consider looking at what actually is having a negative impact and putting you into the lower mind. You know, like I was saying before, alcohol, drugs, you know, doing the dirty on your missus, whatever it is, these things will have an impact on you and your psyche and your well-being. So if you start mastering yourself a little bit, finding joy within yourself more, you are going to make a difference wherever you go. Literally, you could be sat in a restaurant and change the whole place. And that's how powerful we actually are. We mustn't forget that.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I wanted to ask you about ties into what you've just said there. And it's this idea of NPCs. This is another thing that we hear a lot in line with the simulation idea. The idea that there are a few of us, I don't know what percentage figure you might put on it. Maybe we're at 8 to 10% of the human population, perhaps, who are awake and aware. They've undergone a conscious awakening of some kind. And they're now in a different place spiritually to where they were before. And the idea is that this percentage, whatever it is, 8 to 10% maybe of the population, are having these experiences, but everyone else around us, the remaining 90%, whatever it may be, are NPCs, non-player characters, and they're there to help facilitate our experience and our growth and our evolution, but they themselves are not going through this. That's why we see what's termed as normies, who seem perfectly happy with the world. They're going about their business, doing their job, going to the pub, watching the football, whatever, and everything just seems fine to them. So these are what are referred to as NPCs, and they don't seem to be going through this amazing conscious process that the few of us are. So let me just get your views on that whole idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and if Kev was sat here with me now, he'd probably be telling you about his home life in that respect. You know, his good wife is someone he would say is an NPC. You know, the fact that, you know, her life, she wants to just do the normal thing and then watch Coronation Street maybe at night and then get your dressing gown and slippers on or whatever and go to bed, and to a lot of people that's fine, you know, and is it because the NPCs have not connected fully to their source, or are they just not on a soul mission, or, you know, or is it the fact that they are empty vessels as well? I mean, they're really interesting conversation. We had a podcast the other day with a guy called Roberto. I can't remember I can't pronounce his surname, but he's a Toltec, and he was saying exactly that there is probably 90% on this planet that are NPCs. There are 10% that are here to make a difference, and he believes firmly that we're in a projected simulation itself, you know, and it's a game. We're in a video game essentially, and we need to learn how to play the game. So it's like Grand Theft Auto, isn't it? You're walking around and there's all these people just getting about in their business and
exactly
playing no part.
And we don't remember agreeing to be a part of this game, and yet here we are.
Well, again, I had another podcast with a gentleman called Lawrence. It was a fantastic. Got banned from YouTube actually for some ridiculous reason. I think it's because we mentioned COVID. But he was saying we were trapped here. We were tricked to come here. That was his take on it. And we are the fallen angels was his take. And you know, there's a lot of views on that as well. And our purpose is to find our way back. And that's the challenge of the game. And you wouldn't want to come here if it was boring either. You wouldn't want a plain sailing game if you want to play a game. If you are a soul that's just decided to come to Earth, you don't want to just go through life and be bored. You're going to want the challenges to grow. So we're here to face them, and let's do it. And let's, if Lawrence is right there, let's find our way back. You know, if that's what we're meant to be. But I do believe at this period in time, the likes of you and I, Mark, are here to make a difference. And I also think I was an NPC at one time. I look back at my life and I was the same. Yeah. So for whatever reason, our spark has ignited, but maybe we're going to be sparking plenty others along the way, and the tipping balance will come.
Well, we didn't come to lose. I don't
No.
accept that. I've been saying this since 2020 in all my video commentaries. We didn't come here at this point in the timeline to be enslaved and to get put into these bloody digital prisons that they're trying to build for us all.
No.
We know what they want, you know, the so-called elites, and I just don't accept they're ever going to get it, because we didn't come here to be imprisoned in that way.
It's a no, isn't it? It's just a no.
Why would we have chosen to come here and just be slaves?
No, it's just not. I do not consent. It's not happening. It's just not happening. You know, we have been, over the many years, humanity has been taken away from its natural base, which is being in nature and connected to source. You look at the way the Native Americans, that what happened to them, you know, and any other kind of indigenous races. They have come and destroyed those indigenous races and took them away from source. This next plan of action that they've got to take us into transhumanism is to completely take people away from source. Now, we need to go back to that, and we need to educate the others that there is much more. You're much more, and there is much more. And we need to connect to that. And it's with love. The answer is always going to be choose fear or love. And you got to start bringing that love. You've got to go more heart-centered and start being the true essence that you are, not the programmed NPCs.
That's right. Bloody hell, what a conversation.
I know. I got something as well I thought I'd say, because we were talking earlier on about it's happening to good people, you know, and why is it happening to good people? And this quote that I read before, it says, the more light the seeker possesses, the more darkness he uncovers. And I think that is a good reason why we are facing stuff right now, you know.
If you're here to shine light, you've got to walk into the darkness, I guess.
You do indeed. But we're not here to lose, are we? We're
That's
here
right.
to get through.
That's right. All right, mate. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Just remind people where they can go to watch your podcast conversations and anything else you might want to add as we wrap up here.
Yeah, fantastic, Mark. You'll find us on YouTube, Drake, Michigan. If you search Drake, Michigan, we're on Rumble and Odyssey as well. And we're on Spotify, which seems to be taking shape nicely. Yeah, that's the best thing. And if you want to contact us, feel free. Go to drakemichigan.com and you send us a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We are working on a number of initiatives at the moment to help people going through the dark night of the soul, if you like. So feel free, if you're having a struggle. One of the reasons Drake Michigan exists at this point is to try and bridge the gap and be a safe space for somebody that's going through an awakening process.
Sure. Okay, and thanks for coming on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's great to speak to you again, Mark.